United Healthcare, the Coalition of Texans with Disabilities, Raise Your Voice 2020 Advocate Connection Program, September 23rd, 2020, Medical Cannabis.
Thank y'all all for joining us. Today, of course, we're going to be focusing on medical cannabis in the upcoming legislative session. So we wanted to first kick it off with a poll, and then I forgot, Laura, I'm supposed to audio describe myself. For those of you that are calling in on the phone, again, my name is Chase Bearden. I'm the Deputy Director here at CTD. I'm a white male, and I use a wheelchair, and I'm sitting in our guest bedroom, so at least not at the office. But thank you all again for joining us. And as I said earlier, we're going to kick this off with a poll just to kind of see where everyone stands. And for those of you who can't see the poll, I will audio describe it. The question is, are you or a family member currently accessing medical cannabis in some form? There's 3 different answers you could give. Yes is the first one. Second one is no, and I don't plan to. And the third one is no, but I'm interested in thinking about it. For those of you that can't access this poll, because you don't have your screen reader won't get to it, we will also have this in the follow-up email where you can let us know. I'll leave that up for a moment, and as we move on to having Jolene kind of introduce what CTD does, and then we'll move on with the program from there. So Jolene, I'm going to pass it over to you and leave the poll open until you're done.
Thanks, Chase. My name is Jolene Foster. I am a white woman with long brown hair and black rimmed glasses. I'm wearing a pink shirt with a gray sweater because it's freezing in my room. And behind me is various things that I picked up antiquing and some of my children's art. So first of all, some of you may be familiar with CTD, some of you may not be. We've been around since 1978. We're a cross-disability organization, which means we touch on all issues, all disabilities, across all settings and across the lifespan. For example, today we're going to talk about access to medical cannabis, but we'll also be including other issues, upcoming Raise Your Voice sessions that will be held on Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Some of the things that we'll be talking about will be school mental health, school discipline, access to medications, and a bunch of other really great stuff. 2 of the core principles and the work that we do here at CTD is to involve you, to involve people with lived experience, their loved ones, those who navigate the services and supports, the day-to-day challenges, even the successes. We value you as self-advocates, and we value community input, and we will put your input first. So just to kind of give you an idea about what these Raise Your Voice sessions are, if you haven't participated in one of the previous sessions that we've had, the idea is really to have an opportunity to hear from you, for you to hear from us, kind of what we're working on, and then just to move forward together. So when we say raise your voice, we really do mean raise your voice. We want to hear from you, and these sessions are going to be structured in an interactive way where we can get some of that input and really put it to work. So today, like I said, we're going to be covering medical cannabis, but we hope that you'll join us in some of the upcoming sessions that are posted. The registration links are posted on our website. So what you can expect by being involved in Raise Your Voice, first of all, we're going to listen to you, we're going to involve you, we're going to share some information on advocacy issues, development, strategies, the process of legislation, and other opportunities. And you'll have an opportunity to also connect with some self-advocates, some that you may know, some that are new to you, some seasoned advocates. I can see that we have some on here, and so many of you who have been participating in our previous sessions. We hope that you will all continue to participate. We have an experienced staff in advocacy, and we're here to collaborate with you. So finally, before I kick it over to Chase, the question we've been getting is, what is January 2021 going to look like? What is the Texas legislature doing? How are they going to file? What are their budget priorities? How is session going to operate? And the answer is we don't really know yet. Currently, the House is experimenting with this request for information where they're accepting written comments, but we don't know what office visits may look like. We know that the legislature is taking protective measures, anticipating that COVID-19 is still going to be around. But as we get guidance from our friends at the Capitol, we're here to also continue to share that information with you and make sure that you have an opportunity to get involved. So with that, I will kick it back over to Chase.
All right, thank you, Jolene. And I'm just going to share those results from the poll. So about half say yes, that they are currently accessing some form of cannabis for medical use, and half say that they are still thinking about it. I think that's kind of what we see most of the time. We also have two that don't plan on using cannabis for any kind of medical use. And I think that's been the interesting part about the path we've taken at CTD, is that we've really focused on the medical side of cannabis. And the amount of time we've spent now working on this and talking to people, we've seen this dramatic shift from the majority of people not even wanting to talk about it. That stigma was still there. It wasn't looked at as a medical product. And now over the years, as we've gone through the legislature and we've slowly made some progress, you see a big shift on both sides of the political spectrum that are benefiting or have a family member that's benefiting from some use of cannabis. So today's discussion and what we're wanting to do is really focus on where is the future of cannabis for us in medical? What is the best looking bill that we could put forth or that we should be thinking about as the legislature starts in this upcoming session? And to do that, we have Susan Hayes. And for those of you who don't know Susan Hayes, she is probably one of the most knowledgeable people, in my opinion, on cannabis when we're looking at trying to get a bill through the legislature and really crafting something that benefits the people, not just the industries. So I want to introduce Susan. She's going to talk to us a little bit about what she thinks would be the best cannabis bill moving forward, and then we'll have a discussion after that. Susan,
all right.
take it away.
Thanks, Chase. I appreciate the introduction and having me here today. And I've been spending a lot of time for the last couple of years thinking about what does the best bill look like, not buy into the idea that we have to take the crumbs from the table that the political conventional wisdom says is all we can get. And what I've learned from spending time in legal states that had medical cannabis and then were expanding out to adult use and legalization, is a lot of times medical gets pushed to the side. And the quality and the variety of products that people can access actually can go down as the state legalizes. And the patient, and in talking to doctors and talking to patients who have been using medical cannabis, the variety of products really matters. And what do I mean by variety? Well, a couple of things. THC level, as y'all know, probably know right now, the current Texas law, the content of THC in the product is, or in the plant at least, is limited to 0.5% THC by dry weight, which is pretty close to hemp as opposed to marijuana under the legal definitions. And there are plenty of other helpful things in cannabis, like CBD or CBN or some of the terpenes, but for many people in many conditions, they need the THC, or they need the THC in combination with CBD. In what I see in some legal states is you go in the store and half of what's there or more is a very high THC product with very little other things in it. And when I'm explaining it to legislators, I tell them it's like going in a liquor store and half the shelves are Everclear, which what I want is a really good bottle of wine, and something that has a more subtle mix of content in it. Another aspect of what might make a good bill is allowing some real competition in the industry. and allowing smaller businesses to get in. So there is more room for innovation for different products, not only the content, but also delivery system. Inhaling cannabinoids is a way to get the effect quickly. Ingesting it is a way to have a more long-lasting effect. Texas started out basically with just CBD oil, and that helps many people, but not everybody. And having people and their physicians to have some personal choice about what formulations, dosages, etc., work best for that patient with that condition at that stage of their condition or disease. And politically, where I think we are is much more momentum behind an expanded medical cannabis, but running into the sort of squeezing of the bottleneck that the pandemic's going to do to the session. There's going to just be a lot less bandwidth, particularly if there's not a widespread vaccine by session, where there's talk that the members may only be introducing 3 to 5 bills apiece instead of the typical dozens that they do. And that's going to make it harder for us to get something through, and get something through that will be most helpful to the largest percentage of people out there. And I kind of jumped all over the place, but as specific issues that I should be addressing more that I should say?
Well, I think if you would expand on, I know for a lot of people, the talk has been, we got to increase the level of THC. And if we're going to be looking at a legislature that's going to be, bandwidth has been lowered, they're looking at filing less bills. Are we more likely or less likely looking at trying to go for a large overhaul bill that would get all the different aspects of what we want? Or should we be kind of looking at what are the top 2 or 3 things that would make the biggest bang for our buck this session? And I know you and I've had that discussion of how much THC versus not enough. And we talked about the different levels of plants. I think that's a great discussion to kind of bring up so people start understanding the different families of the genetics and how that might be affected.
I'll walk through that. And there's a ton of confusion with this. And we saw this, I also worked on the hemp bill last session, of awkward conversation with even sponsors of the hemp bill who were like, oh wait, I thought this was a totally different plant than marijuana. And I would have to launch into a little song and dance explaining that genetically. The plant, whether it's marijuana or hemp, is cannabis sativa. And if any of you have been in dispensaries in legal states, they'll talk about sativa versus indicas versus hybrids and the alleged medical aspects of each. And that's really not very helpful information. Strain names aren't helpful information. What's helpful information to patients and doctors is what cannabinoids and terpenes are in that particular product you're buying. So I am a huge fan and absolutely want to see third-party independent testing and what I call full spectrum testing for medical cannabis. In some states, you only get your CBD and THC levels, and that's a small part of the story. You need to, it's like looking on the side of a box of cereal. How many vitamins are you getting and in what quantity? And then as far as the bill itself, back to the types of the plant, that said, botanists have moved away from thinking about sativa and indica as subspecies, and they're now categorizing the plant in 5 chemotypes, meaning instead of what it looks like, let's talk about what it outputs. And type 1 is a high THC, low CBD cannabis, which you would think of now as very much marijuana. Type 2 is a cannabis with about an even ratio of THC and CBD. And that tends to be the more traditional varieties that probably were grown in the 70s and 80s. CBD softens the psychoactive effect of THC. So those are, I think, maybe lend themselves more to being medicinal cannabis. Type 3 is a high CBD, low THC. Now the legal line between hemp and marijuana is 0.3% THC by dry weight, whereas our TCUP program is 0.5%. So you see what I mean by it's almost hemp. Theoretically, all of type 3 would be hemp and not marijuana, except testing varieties are such, and plants being plants, they don't really care where the law drew a line in the sand. So a lot of those type 3s, about half of them will test as marijuana instead of hemp, even though nobody's going to get high off of them, which is sort of part of the absurdity of the federal and state regulation right now on hemp. Type 4 cannabis is a CBG cannabis, cannabigerol. And CBG is the precursor molecule in the plant to both THC and CBD. Whether a given cannabis plant produces one or both, or THC, CBD, or both, depends on its genetics. And there's an enzyme present in the plant that converts that molecule as the plant grows. Now, if the plant lacks those enzymes, it just grows CBG. And there's some science starting to roll out about the medicinal effects of that. And then type 5 cannabis is what we might traditionally think of as hemp, just high fiber, hardly any cannabis in it. One thing that happens with the changes of the federal and state laws in the last few years that I think really threw a wrench in the system and in people's thinking is the 2018 Farm Bill legalized CBD. They defined hemp as all the cannabinoids that come from cannabis so long as the original plant was under 0.3% THC. And that legalized CBD nationally, although it's still going to be subject to FDA regulation. And the FDA takes forever to do anything. So now we're in this sort of gray area. Now, where does that leave us back in Texas with a bill? There are tinkering bills and then there are comprehensive bills. And I've already seen some bill draft language for some tinkering bills that just might, as y'all may be aware, our law lists conditions that qualify. Perhaps the most offensive one is terminal cancer. You can have cancer and not qualify. Not until you're actually dying will the state of Texas let you have this, which is absurd. So we might see bills that just delete the word terminal, which is, I suppose, better than a sharp stick in the eye. But it doesn't really help when you can buy legally on the market, if you have a reliable source, a CBD product that's pretty close to the medical marijuana you can get in Texas. Another way there could be tinkering is raising that THC rate. And I've already had discussions with offices that putting a percent THC in a bill or a law is dumb for a variety of reasons. One, it's not how doctors dose their patients. Doctors dose in milligrams, not percentages. And that creates a lot of problems for creating products and getting products to patients that are really helpful. Second, like I said, the plant doesn't care. It's going to grow its THC level wherever it grows it, given it's about, I don't know, 90% genetics that will determine that. But growing conditions also, like any plant, what your output is or your yield is. And for people to really, and doctors and patients, feel their way around their products, artificially limiting what's available is not medically helpful. Another reason it's not medically helpful is doctors ought to be allowed to practice medicine and not legislators come in and artificially limit things. You know, and as a policy argument, it's about as absurd as 3.2 beer. If any of y'all ever lived in states that had that, the effect was you had a kind of a crappy beer and way too much carbonation in your gut at the same time because they would overly carbonate the beer to keep the level down. And you get those other kinds of weird manipulations of the products with THC as well. So those tinkering bills, I'm less a fan of. What I think is better for patients long-term is what I would call a comprehensive bill, where it's really thinking about how do we regulate this to encourage innovation, encourage a wide variety of products on the market, and encourage access to both doctors and patients to the system. And you know, when Texas wrote its original law, it wasn't very sophisticated in its thinking about regulating cannabis. And that was in 2015. That's kind of a lifetime in the development of cannabis regulation around the country. So we're really starting with a blank slate. And which I like to view as an opportunity for Texas to take a look at what other states have done, learn something, and just do it better and do it in a way that provides more access for more people.
And Susan, thank you for that, because that really leads into what CTD's been thinking and looking at. You know, for some of our top priorities, it's making sure that Texas does its job and regulates well. At the end of the day, when we start talking about medical cannabis and working with doctors to prescribe these medications, is that we want them to be able to do that and do it safely. And to be able to do that, it's dosing things in milligrams so that people know what they're getting. It's doing good independent lab testing that's broad spectrum so that you can see all the different components of cannabis. And that's something that most people don't realize, is that there are so many different molecules, I guess you would consider it, Susan, but it's not just THC and CBD. It's so many different things. And for someone who's like me in a wheelchair that has spasms, sometimes it's a higher level of THC with CBD that makes my body actually not have pain and spasms, versus someone else who might just need a little bit or may not need any THC at all. So it's giving doctors and patients that opportunity to make that decision on what works best for them. And as Susan talked about, giving them a choice and in a variety of products and ways to consume that works best for them. For some people, just oil under their tongue versus a lozenge, or using some kind of vaporizer affects them differently. So for us, our goal is going to be to make sure that doctors and patients have access to a greater amount of THC mixed in with all of the other components of the plant. Also looking at good lab testing. And one thing that, Susan, I'd like to see if you could chime in on, and I know that we've had this asked by some parents, but also the legal protections. We have some parents who their kids are at school and they can't get CBD and take it or administered to them by the nurse, even though it's a prescribed medication. And then we have people that are being employed where some employers are saying, no, if you test positive, you're out. What are your thoughts on that? Because this is still federally illegal, yes, in a sense, but legal in Texas to a point.
I want to jump in for just a second. For folks who are kind of new to this issue, if you could slow down on the acronyms and just, quickly explain like what they are. I'm even learning some new ones. CBG, I've never even heard of.
I just typed it in.
Okay, awesome. Thanks.
Well, and I'll say working on this issue makes me wish I would have paid more attention in high school chemistry, because it's a lot of chemistry, and a lot of chemistry of, I've also, the many vocabulary words I've picked up is pharmacokinetics, meaning how your body processes a pharmaceutical. And when you get down to it, it's just all molecules. It's all atoms and molecules. When we say drug versus food versus pharmaceutical, whatever, it's still a molecule. It's just how the law chooses to view it. Is it a food or a drug? And on that, to sort of riff off the Food and Drug Act, the two goals of that federal act is that things are safe and effective. And we've talked a little bit about safety with the testing, so you know what's in it and there aren't any pesticides or bad things, but also effectiveness. Unless you know your dosages and what you're getting, you and your doctor can't figure out what's effective for you. And I'll kind of give you all the speech I've given to some, and I've found this really helps even with very conservative members to help them understand, we all have, it turns out, we've only learned this the last 30 years, an endocannabinoid system. Our bodies have cannabinoid receptors in them. All mammals have this. There's theory that we co-evolved with cannabis because it is a very effective medicine with us, and humans have cultivated it for thousands of years now. But everybody's system is different. And a dosage that works for one patient isn't going to work for another. That's true of most drugs. I think it seems like it's more true with cannabis, and it's more true with people with different conditions. And I went to a medical cannabis CME, it seems like 20 years ago, but I think it was only 3 years ago in Denver, hilariously called MJ for MDs, and listened to medical lectures about it. And I was very shocked to hear how much THC some of the patients were taking. You know, in legal states, the standard edible dose is 10 milligrams, which frankly is like me drinking a bottle of whiskey. That's a lot for me. For other people, it's not. A new phrase I learned is whether your patient is cannabis naive or not, meaning if you've not taken cannabis before, lower doses will do you compared to someone who's built up some tolerance in their body. But some of particularly the people with severe conditions, kids with severe seizures, we're getting over 100 milligrams of cannabis a day, which is way too much for most of us to take in. But for these kids, it didn't even make them high. It just leveled them off because their endocannabinoid systems are so out of whack. Right before last session, or during last session, one medical article came out about people with autism and surmising by testing their endocannabinoid levels that they had an endocannabinoid deficiency, a severe one. And that might be why cannabis seems to help people with autism. And if any of y'all are science nerds, you should go to PubMed. That's the National Institute of Health's online database. Chase knows I would nerd out on it in the middle of the night during session because we would go into offices and hear that, oh, the research just isn't there yet. But you type in cannabis in PubMed and tens of thousands of hits come up. And then you can start narrowing by condition. You know, and we mentioned THC versus CBD. There's some pretty good research out there that a 1-to-1 ratio of the two works well with pain. And there's a pharmaceutical product that's been developed that's a 1-to-1 ratio. So like I said, for the law to have, when the law has arbitrary barriers to all this development, that's bad policy. So what we're looking for in a bill is a bill that is good policy in the sense that it gives access to patients, it helps the industry produce and want to produce a variety of product, and that the system around the state of how people get it. And I worded that kind of vaguely because some states do these cannabis dispensaries, some have dispensed through pharmacies. Because it's federally legal, it becomes a problem to go through traditional systems. So we may end up with a dispensary system, but whatever that is, it's got to be done in a way that really is science-driven and is good for medical. And thank you to Marcus for posting the PubMed link on there. Everybody should hit that now and bookmark it. And Chase brought up, Laura, before you hopped on, these sort of collateral issues that affect people. And absolutely, we need those cleaned up. We need to make sure someone's not punished by CPS if they're using medical cannabis for themselves or for their child under a doctor's supervision. And there's been so much, and I one day I did search the word marijuana spelled with an H in Texas statutes just to see where it shows up. And I did the same with federal. And because of the war on drugs and all the hating on cannabis in the last 40 years, there are statutes everywhere that criminalize it. I lived in Nevada for a little while, and the people I worked with who had concealed handgun licenses would not also get a medical cannabis card because it's a crime federally to have a gun and marijuana on you. And they didn't want that data to be combined because the state knew they had the concealed handgun license. They didn't want the state to know that they were buying marijuana too. That's a lot of cleanup. And it needs to happen because it does catch people who've done no wrong in any moral sense or ethical sense. The same with employers' policies. And that's something that employers are going to have to come around to. You know, we heard very early during session, some guy with a trucking company had to fire their favorite employee because the guy had taken some CBD oil that had THC in it. He didn't know it, but the company, by God, had a zero tolerance policy because we're so anti-drug. And those policies have, vast negative consequences beyond just cannabis, but will catch people who may not know what they're getting because they're bought something in a convenience store, or may not even, certainly never got high in the sense we say that in street talk, the psychoactive effects, but because they have the trace amounts in their body, or because the testing wasn't very accurate, can be punished collaterally.
And, Susan, you hit on a lot of the main topics of what we'll be looking at as we go through the session, not just the testing, but also the employment side, the decriminalization to a point that we make sure all of our members are staying safe. But at the end of the day, I think that's what we're looking for, is what is the safe way to regulate medical cannabis that is effective. And that being said, typically at this point, we go into breakout rooms and let y'all have some discussions and a chance to kind of talk about the issues. I'm going to let Laura take this part, but what we really want out of y'all is to hear what you want in the next cannabis bill so that we can take these issues we're already working on and combine that in and make sure we're not missing anything. So I'm going to pass it over to Laura. And Susan, thank you so much for joining us. And
Most welcome.
it's a complex topic.
It is, with lots of potential.
Yes, yes.
Following group discussions.
Thank y'all and welcome back. It looks like everyone stayed. And something we want to do really quick, just to kind of gather what y'all talked about in your breakouts, is called a chatterfall for those of you that haven't done it. Down at the bottom is the chat function. We want to hear like the top issues or what you think we should put into this next legislative bill. And then we're able to capture all of the comments y'all are making. And then we'll build on that. And so we also take those and the issues that y'all are dealing with, and we're going to try and keep structuring more of these as we get closer to the legislative session, that will be able to bring you more detail about what the current bills that are going through look like, what options or what opportunities are there for you to speak out or to access legislators. So we're using these kind of weekly different topic issues as a stepping stone into the session and being able to keep that face-to-face contact as we go through. So I'm also going to put up a poll. This will be the last poll we put up. And it's basically talking about, since there is a stigma around medical cannabis, are you able or willing to speak publicly about the issue? I know I've spoke with some of our close friends and colleagues who they're afraid to even speak out about it because they're afraid that it could affect their job. So I'm going to put that poll up. It's more for us just to kind of get an idea of where everyone stands. You can answer yes, no, or it's complicated. Basically, if you're not sure yet. We'll also put these, for those of you that can't access the poll, in a follow-up email where you can also give us any information that you might have not been able to put into the chat. And it looks like some of those chats are coming through now. And we really do appreciate all the work. We want to take the information you're giving us and actually, have your voice heard. And this is the way we're finding that we can do that. Other than that, I also want to bring up and just thank our sponsors who are helping us put this on. During COVID, it's been difficult for us to be able to do that typical fundraising. So we just want to thank some of the groups that have done that, and that's United Healthcare, Superior Health Plan, DentaQuest, AMGEN, AstraZeneca, Pharma, Hart InterCivic, CDS in Texas, Amerigroup, Shield Healthcare, CareSource, and MCNA and Molina Healthcare. So they're the ones that have helped kind of fund our way to be able to host these. And we really do look forward to hearing from y'all as much as possible. And we want y'all to reach out to us. So in that follow-up email, please let us know if there's something we could do better or that y'all would rather have us do. It may be that we're not hitting any of the topics you want us to. But we want to hear back from you in those emails so that we can make sure we're reaching out for what our members really need.
Thank you to our 2020 Raise Your Voice sponsors: United Healthcare, Amerigroup, CDS in Texas, Pharma, Superior Health Plan, AMGEN, AstraZeneca, the DentaQuest Partnership, CareSource, MCNA Dental, Molina Healthcare, Shield Healthcare.